Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Golden Sun, Red Rising, Book 2, Chapters 1 through 4. Or was it 5? In these chapters, this started off so harsh, you guys. Oh my god, I wasn't ready for how brutal this is. I want our guy to win always, and I recognize that that is not a reality that we live in. I just want it, though. Not sorry. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashley for commissioning this episode. It was indeed chapters 1 through 4. I just double checked because I was like, I hope I didn't read over, but I didn't. Their chapter titles, which I didn't mention in the intro, are Warlords, The Breach, Blood and Piss, and Fallen. And there's also the prologue. Y'all, I'm gonna need this writer to tone it down a little bit with his making me feel sad. He is just really out here punching me in the stomach. And I'm like, I guess I'm glad you didn't piss on me also, I suppose, with the way that this whole vibe is going. Let's start things off. So, in the prologue, we get just a sort of recap of the very bare bones of what happened in the previous book. I actually, as somebody who can get a little bit irritated with the recaps at the beginning of books when they are in a series, I feel like this is pretty brief and well done. It's a necessary evil a lot of the time, where I understand the why in terms of just not only if somebody's just picking up this book like a crazy person and reading out of order, but also I don't remember what amount of time passed between the publications, but people don't always just reread the previous book before they start the next one. So sometimes it just helps them to have a refresh. But there are times where they can go on into too much detail, or they can tell you such incredibly basic stuff in detail that I'm like, if you don't at least know that, you shouldn't be reading this. So I thought that this was just very well done. It's cursory. It's extremely brief. And it also just reminds us of the energy of the way the last book ended, because it picks up at exactly the moment the last book ended, which led me to believe we were picking up the whole book from right here. We don't. We have this as a recap, and then when we go into chapter 1, we have jumped ahead in time some. And Augustus is, just really laying it on thick. I love at one point that Darrow specifically mentions that this dude loves dramatic repetition. Because, for real, can you calm it down a little bit, sir? You just keep on doing the same, and some people are like this, This is clearly a guy who takes himself very seriously. But it's tedious. Genuinely tedious, sir. I'm going to need just take it down several notches, but he can't. That's the point of his position. And the Bolognas, I just really want to say, I know that part of the point of this is that it doesn't make sense, that Darrow can't help the way things went. But God, it is so frustrating. And that's the nature of these sorts of feuds a lot of the time, is that they feel, if not silly, they feel like they shouldn't go on for as long as they do. You know what I mean? It just seems like, can we not resolve this really? And I wanted in a later scene for Darrow to be like, how come you're not mad at the people who did the thing? But it turns out that probably they are, because they're angry at Augustus. And Darrow's theory which is kind of casually mentioned, but which I was like, wait, what? Darrow's theory is that Augustus, put Julian in the cell with Darrow explicitly to create a breach between him and Cassius, because Darrow, likely because of his incredibly high scores on the entrance exam, he was being, in a way, handpicked by Augustus to be on his own side, thus ensuring he gets somebody who the Bolognas are going to be after that's indebted to him for protection. Which is, I can't believe that never occurred to me, but makes total sense. And I just thought it was kind of funny how casually Darrow mentions, like, you put him in that cell with me, because I don't remember Darrow thinking that before. And that theory is not mentioned to him, like, or is not mentioned in his head when we're, in his POV. It's simply said to Augustus in the heat of this dismissal, which is truly infuriating. So this prologue is him just saying, I'm protecting you. They hate you, but they can't do anything to you because you're mine. And he's thinking how he can't wait to go to Augustus' house and burn it down. But then he thinks about Mustang. And the last sentence of the prologue is, they say a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. They made no mention of the heart. And then we go to chapter 1, Warlords. And we are already in a starship, which is called Quietus, by the way. I kind of enjoyed the fact that Darrow's just leaning into that, And it's a very basic game. Take down all the other ships. And based on the state of everybody here, sleep isn't a thing. You just stay awake as long as you need to for this to work. I don't recall if it's specifically mentioned just how long they have been at this game, but it seems some of them are doing better with this lack of sleep than others. And Augustus had told him, win as my children cannot, and you will bring honor to the name Augustus. Win at the academy, and you earn yourself a fleet. He'd have me win for him, but I'd win for the red girl with a dream bigger than she ever could be. And that's what's so difficult, because later on, Darrow tries to say, do you think losing the game is what I'm upset about? People died. But he has to admit to himself he does care about the game. With good reason. This matters. Calling it a game is so dismissive, like in the context of what it really means in this universe. So we find out that he and Mustang, she is off doing her own thing. She asked me to stay as I bid her and Mars go. Oh, wait, I missed the kindest of them. The one who asked me to stay. He's talking about his wife. Oh, wait, no, he isn't. I am so sorry, you guys. I got confused here because it says, I am the peerless scarred, which I'm assuming you guys, I remember last episode, I was like, what does scarred exactly mean? And I guess it's just that you came out of your test. Is that all that means? Cruelest and brightest of all humankind, but I miss the kindest of them, the one who asked me to stay as I bid her and Mars goodbye on her balcony almost a year ago. Mustang. I gave her a horse-crested gold ring as a parting gift, and she gave me a razor. Fitting. And he's having a little bit of I won't say a crisis, it's not that full-blown, but he's feeling a bit uneasy. He hasn't heard from her since he left Mars, which, for a year, that's a long time. I'm wondering if there's been, interceptions in communication. He hasn't heard from the Sons of Ares either, which he thought Dancer would be in touch, and that has not happened. And also, Severo and him, they are not really in touch. And he says, like, neither of us is making a particular effort on that front, especially me, but he does wonder what's going on with him. Ashley says, basically, if you did well in the institute, you become a peerless Scarred. Okay. So, yeah, they are, this whole thing with the starships. We fight with dummy munitions and launch raiding parties from ship to ship in the way of gold astral combat. No reason to break a ship that costs the gross yearly output of 20 cities when you can send leechcraft packed with obsidians, golds, and greys to seize her vital organs and make her your prize. Well, if these are leechcraft that they're in command of, I don't know if, like, the destruction that happened actually matters to anybody. Maybe these are meant to be totally disposable. I don't know. You know, like, I'm not totally sure, but there's some real destruction that happens a little bit later. So Roke is here, and he is saying that whatever it is they're looking at is a trap. Karnas knows that you're eager to end the game, so he'll wait on the other side, force us into a choke point, and release his missiles. And, of course, we've got Tactus here, who's like, everything's a trap. I really like how the narrator has him sort of drawl. Like, just the way that he speaks is so affectedly lazy and unconcerned. But you sense that he's not unconcerned at all. It's just that he is attempting this, like, posture. And this dude is evidently... I don't know if stims are, like, actually chemically addictive, but he has taken 5 today, which is more than average. And so there's a bit of mention of that. And he also says something about, like, demon powder, which I'm going to assume is something like cocaine, you know, not necessarily in its actual effects, but the position that drug occupies in this universe. So this dude's a bit of... I mean, it's unsurprising that he's a bit of a problem because Tactus was from the start. What Darrow did was make him useful despite that. But he is still frustrating, for sure, in this little conversation. And there is this girl who is half-sister to Antonia. Her name is Victra al-Julie. And Victra, her sister Antonia is the one who killed Roke's girlfriend. And when she mentions Antonia, he gets really, like, weird about it. So evidently there's been this rule that she's not supposed to mention Antonia at all. And I almost felt like she was flirting with Darrow at one point. And he doesn't, not only does he not respond to her flirting, but he chastises her for using her sister's name, and she seems really put off by that. But long story short, with this scene, it's not, like, important exactly how this goes down, but he wins this interaction, right? And he's really feeling himself, and is like, now they know that my victory in the Institute was not a one-off. And he is just, like, feels that he has proven something here. And then all of a sudden, there's this, like, flicker on the screen. And there are little red marks, like red glows, everywhere that there is still an enemy. And there's somebody who's like, sir, something's happening. And it's supposed to be that all enemies are gone. There aren't supposed to be any left. And yet there's a red dot that shows off. And then it goes away. And they're thinking, oh, okay, it's just like sensors. Sometimes asteroids can, like, cause them to be sensed as an enemy. But that's, you know, an incorrect reading. I see with my naked eyes what our instruments struggled to detect. one shadowed destroyer emerges from a hollow in the asteroid, a ship I thought we had defeated 3 days ago. Its engines were off as it lay in wait. Its front half is torn and black from damage. Now its engines blast at full power and its trajectory takes it directly toward my ship. It's going to ram us. And this is remarkable because I never expected that when we were dealing with this sort of equipment, it was going to be possible for them to use this sort of approach. The number of people who die in this exercise is just overwhelming. It's so sad and so pointless, you know? And he hesitates to run out. Like, there's like a particular escape pod that his people jump into, but there's this pink Theodora who is his advisor, and he has evidently grown to like her, and she is hanging on because there is like a blue boy who isn't letting go of his like operations area and fleeing, and she's trying to get him to leave, and he hesitates because of her hesitating, and the destroyer hits while they're here, like out in the open and not in a pod. He goes unconscious for just a second, and when he wakes up, she is there, her leg is all fucked up, and she has managed to wake him and is like, you have got to get up. He says that there's a pod in his quarters, but she's like, I'm not going to make it. You have just got to go. And instead, he picks her up, which clearly hurts very badly for her. And he's heading toward the pod, and a lot of people that work for him, he is passing on the way. It's made very evident what a huge crew is on the ship. This isn't, you know, some little outfit with 5 or 6 people. And he gets to the spot where this like pod is going to be, but understandably, there is a little bit of a scuffle about who the fuck is getting in the pod, because like the Titanic, they don't make enough for everybody else to escape. That's not how this is built. They do not care whether everybody makes it off. It's not about that. And the scuffle eventually escalates to a Gray who has his gun pulled on Darrow. And he is really pissed that Darrow is about to let a pink get in. And it's like, I'm a free man. I have a family. It's my right to go. She's just a whore, a jumped up whore. And she can't even have children. And Darrow says, and what would your children think of you now? Which is a pretty good response. Marcel's eyes fill with tears. The scorcher quivers in his thick hand. Then a gunshot. His body stiffens and crumples lifelessly to the deck as the bullet from the sergeant's scorcher carries through his head to slam into the metal bulkhead. And he reflects in this moment how the version of himself that had existed way back when would have been horrified at this turn of events, but that he has just gotten so used to this sort of violence that it barely even makes an impression anymore. So he gets in, brings Theodora, and then it says, then something deep and horrible roars in the belly of my ship. And he realizes that, like, the torpedoes that they have in storage on the ship are detonating, and everything starts, like, all of the artificial gravity and whatnot disappears, and they can feel themselves beginning to float. I shout at the Greys to get in the pod. Only one stays behind now, face drawn and quiet. And that person like salutes as they're sacrificing themselves. Just a really like awful moment that sort of reminds of how the Reds are fed this story of sacrificing on behalf of future humankind. And this moment, like knowing that this is a literal game to these people and he's dying over it and thinks he's really sacrificed. It's like, is this not how so many of us just live our lives? We try and pretend that the things that are killing us actually mean something. And that's the only comfort we can hold on to, which is just so bleak, man. Ugh. And he says, I realize it wasn't debris I felt against my escape pod as I left the ship. It was people. My crew. Hundreds of low colors spilled into space. He had 3 girls, the dark-skinned corporal says, shuddering as the adrenaline fades away. 2 years, and he was out with a pension, and you popped him in the head. After my report, Coward won't even scrape a death pension, the sergeant sneers. The corporal blinks at her. You cold bitch. Which I did appreciate that being said, because Jesus Christ, can you imagine? It costs you nothing to let him have a pension for his children, and like, you can't even just be, and for why? For what? Just for your personal spitefulness. Like, so gross. More people just died in a blink than during a whole year of the Institute. Roke and Victra hail me over the comms. They will have tracked my data pad and know I am safe. I barely hear them. Anger, thick and evil, swirls inside me, making my hands shake, my heart slam. Somehow, Karna's ship continues through space after bisecting my command, damaged but not unbroken. I do not know how they managed that, but they must know something about the structure, you know, like how. So he gets it, like, he's like, oh, okay, you know what I'm going to fucking do? There's an escape pod that is meant to, like, send human beings through the atmospheres of planets. And I'm going to just fucking send myself at that ship and take them down, because fuck this. And he gets into this, and all of a sudden the controls go dead, and he realizes that the proctors have overridden him, and he isn't allowed to, like, have his big moment. And they say later that it was because it was just a fool's errand, that he was committing suicide. They could never allow it. And maybe that's, like, actually true about what would have happened, but that is certainly not their motivation in doing it. They just wanted to make sure he lost. And it's a really, like, it's kind of funny how at the Institute, it was Augustus he was fighting against the whole time because he wanted his son to win so badly. And the Bologna's backing him because they didn't know. And now it's completely reversed. He finds out later that it was 833 men and women killed. That's horrific. We're closing in on 1,000 people. And it's a game. I mean, how do you live with that? It's just unthinkable. That, you know, yeah. It is just the humiliation of this loss. It would have been bad enough to lose, but it is so extreme. The way that he lost. How do you come back from this, you know? It is one of the highs of the Society's military for the midworld of Mars. My fellow students will have been watching here in the dormitories. So too will many fleet officials and peerless who flocked for the final weeks of the game for parties and viewing. None will mention the cost of life demanded by Karna's victory, but the defeat will set back my mission. The Sons of Ares have spies. They have hackers and courtesans to steal secrets. What they did not have was a fleet, nor will they now. So, this is heading somewhere terrible that I don't even want to get to, but here we go. Roke is trying to talk to him about how, like, you came in second, which is still amazing, of all the Lancers. And he's just like, dude, first of all, don't try to, like, spin this. And second of all, people are dead. And he's like, they chose service. And he's like, they were conscripted. They didn't choose. They don't have a choice. And when he says, you don't understand a thing, do you? Roke says, of course I don't understand. You never let anyone in. Not me, not Severo. Look how you treated Mustang. You drive friends away as though they were enemies. And I found that interesting because obviously we know why. But how much can Darrow safely share any feelings of rebellion at all? Even saying, like, you know, not confessing to being a red or anything, not confessing to trying to bring the whole edifice down. But if he said here, they were conscripted, they didn't have a choice, you're acting like they chose, would that be like something that would be flagged against him? Would someone notice? Is this not supposed to be something that he even thinks about? I have to assume thinking this way is considered a weakness. And so he's not really even allowed to say that out loud, you know? But I wonder. So he goes to the garden, and takes off his shoes and just sinks his feet into the dirt. And it says, lamps above the trees make a false sun. I lay beneath them till with a groan I pull myself up towards the small hot spring that lies in the center of the glade. He finds a hemathis blossom, which of course makes him think of his wife. And is just, you know, considering the fact that he actually does care that he lost. And Augustus is trying to contact him, but he takes the little, like, transmission thing off, and he gets into the water. Well, it turns out letting his guard down was a mistake. He gets out, and it turns out that there are 9 people, I think, that have come to deal with him. Goliath, who is the one who killed Mustang's brother, and he is enormous. And of course, there's a bunch of other people here, but Goliath is the one that really feels frightening. He's evidently out here murdering all the time and just paying fines for it. As long as they're not golds, he can do it. Except for Mustang's brother, obviously, which was a whole other thing. And these are all Bologna people. And, of course, what Darrow thinks is like, you're here to kill me. And you're going to have a lot of consequences if you do that. And they're like, we don't need to kill you. There's nothing in the rules about what happens if we just beat the shit out of you. Again, that's the boy, Julian. He says, I taught Julian how to fish, Reaper. This is Kellen. As a boy, he didn't like it because he thought it hurt the fish too much. Thought it was cruel. That's the boy your master had you kill. That is the measure of his cruelty. So how grand do you feel? How brave do you fashion yourself? I did not want to kill him. Oh, but we want to kill you, Carnus rumbles. I can't understand, and I know it's not the point, but he was in a position where it was like, you wanted me to roll over and die. That's what you wanted me to do, just because he was a nice kid. Like, I know there's no argument to be made. The point of this is not that there's logic here. The point of this is that the person who runs their shit, Cassius, is pissed and they will do what he tells them. And they liked Julian, so to a degree it feels completely justified to them. There's nothing to do with logic here. But I just can't help but get stuck on the fact that they were all made to do this. And it's only him that's being that it's being held against, you know? It's just, it sucks. It sucks. So at this point, they begin to beat him. And I'm not going into the whole thing, but it's pretty fucking terrible. They cut all of his hair off. They piss on him. and like break his ribs and his sternum. It's bad. This is not the sort of thing that you walk off. They're sending a message, and that message is received loud and clear. And Karnas tells him, "Mother bid me to tell you, a pauper can never be a prince. Every time you look in the mirror, remember what we did to you. Remember, you breathe because we let you. Remember, your heart will one day be on our table. Rise so high, in mud you lie." So, chapter 4. This is so incredibly infuriating, you guys. I swear to God, it makes me crazy. He's in the office with Augustus. And it says, Nero Augustus strokes the lion that lies beside his desk. Y'all, I cannot tell you how long I thought this thing was actually a statue. It says next, strokes the lion, they look like twin statues. They look like twin statues. Not that they are statues, but somehow that failed to penetrate. And it's not until he like gets a piece of meat and tosses it to the lion that I was like, oh, okay. I swear to God, the posturing. Just calm down, Augustus, for Christ's sake. It's been 2 months since the day Karnas beat me at the academy. Though my hair has grown back and my broken bones have mended, my reputation has not. And because of that, my tenure in Archgovernor Augustus' employ is tenuous at best. My enemies grow by the day, but these new ones prefer whispers to razors. More and more do I believe the sons of Ares chose the wrong man. I'm not made for the cold war of politics, not made for subtlety. Hell, I'd hide a boy in the guts of a horse any day, but I wouldn't know how to bribe someone properly if my life depended on it. And that's a really interesting point that he's making, because initially when he's like, oh, they picked the wrong guy, I was like, dude, come on. You absolutely are a legend when it comes to the Institute at this point. How can you say that? And it was interesting because, like, so the thing with the Institute was that Mars is supposed to burn out. Because even though you could see it as simple warfare, it isn't that simple. You are meant to find a way to unite and crush, right? You have to be able to do both. And the point of Mars is that not only are they not good at uniting, but they aren't even good at staying united within their own house. So he figured out how to do that, and that felt like something that was a really big lesson. And he stumbled a little bit along the way. But he eventually managed. Despite the fact that it was about unification and that he figured it out, though, that was still a really physical, and brutal assignment. He was still fighting. He was still crushing skulls. Even as he was taking beatings and making a point, it was all so overt. The subtlety of it, in comparison to the subtlety of this setting, is just, there's no comparison. And when he phrased it like, I am just not good, and he mentions bribery, I was like, yeah, honestly, I can't see him doing that either. Like, what I could see him doing is blackmailing somebody by threatening them. That he could do. Bribing, though, that takes a particular type of almost like a salesman. You've got to be a combination of things. You've got to have very little shame, because anytime you bribe somebody, there's the possibility that they're just going to decline. So you've got to be ready to get a tiny bit humiliated if they don't take the bait. You've got to do it in a subtle enough way that it doesn't come across as a bribe, depending on who you're talking to. You have to make it seem like you're making a deal with them, and not that they are being bought off, but that you are giving them a benefit in exchange for some concession on their part. And so it's seen by them in a light that feels a lot less black and white, and they can tell themselves that it was a negotiation, actually. And he is not... It's not that he can't be good at it, but he hasn't had to be. Because of the nature of the previous challenge and the way that he was raised as a Red, the physicality of it actually suited him really well. But now he's in a context where he can't just like fight people who insult him. I mean, he could, but it seems like it would really be seen as sort of pitiful on his part versus the Bologna's ganging up on him when he's literally naked and beating the shit out of him. But that's not considered shameful because he had already lost, and this is them just like delivering vengeance, you know? So how does he learn this sort of art? Because it is. He's got to figure out how to become a diplomat, somebody who manages with words and force of personality. And he has the personality. I'm wondering if Mustang could be of help. I'm also thinking about the Jackal. I can't remember his actual name. But the fact that he was meant to win, and whether he would have been able to manage this either. Like, I don't know what kind of training he had, but I have to assume that growing up with Augustus, he's got some. And that he would have managed this. So a part of me is like, would you go to the Jackal? Could you, you know, anybody that he retreats to and asks for advice, I feel could use it against him. He would need somebody that he really, really could trust. And I don't know that there's anybody out there like that in reach at the moment. It seems so long ago since Augustus took me on a tour of Mars to show me our domains. He favored me then, bringing me close, teaching me the things his father taught him. I was his favorite, second only to Leto. Or Leto. I think it's Leto. Now he is a stranger and I an embarrassment. And, ouch, you know? A gentle, warm voice made for half-truths drifts through the arch-governor's office. And they're telling him about all of these places that were bombed and that they are, at first blush, laying at the feet of the Sons of Ares. Although later on, someone is like, this does not seem like them. I just don't feel like that's this group. And his name is Pliny, I think. Plyny. I don't know if it's Pliny. I don't know. I'm going to say Pliny. And evidently, he's just like extremely pretty, but doesn't have the presence that is threatening that one would expect of a gold. But he is vicious with words in a way that Darrow can only hope to be. He's ended families with a rumor here, a joke there. His power is of a different breed. Where I am kinetic energy, he is potential. And it's really giving like Varys vibes from Song of Ice and Fire. It's really funny how often these sorts of characters are coded as queer. Like, I say funny. It's not funny. I don't know if it's supposed to be that he's queer or if he's just meant to be a little bit flamboyant in his appearance. But it really always is like there has to be a feminine quality to this sort of person. And I get that impulse, but a part of me is sort of like, this is played. You know what I mean? And I also, guys, I keep meaning to mention this, but I don't love the fact that the Obsidian race is the one that is like the warlike monstrous type. It just like, it just feels fraught. That's all I'm saying. It just feels like maybe you could have picked literally any other color and not gone in this direction, but he did. And, at the very least, he evidently realized that like titling them blacks was not going to work, but it's not far enough away for me to feel cool about it. And the like description of them in the like chart at the start where it's described what each of the colors is, it says Obsidian, a monstrous race bred only for war. And it just, you could have done a lot of different things there. And every time it comes up, I feel really uncomfortable with it and just wish that he had made a different choice. I understand in a basic way why he made the choices that he did, but I think that those impulses are colored, for lack of a better word, pun intended, with some implicit biases that maybe should have been checked. Maybe somebody should have stepped in a little bit and been like, hey, bruh, how about we do something totally other, like irons or platinums, like, because we've got coppers, and I get that the point is that these are really colors, like copper can be a color as well as a metal, but there just has to be a different way. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, what I was saying was just like the implied femininity of these guys and the fact that they are really vicious with words specifically. There is something about that sort of irritates me a little bit. So beside Pliny stands the fourth man in the room, Leto. He's a bright lancer, 10 years my senior, with braided hair and a half-moon grin. He's also a poet with a razor, a younger Lorne Arcos. It's likely he'll inherit Augustus' estate instead of the archgovernor's blood heirs. Truth be told, I rather like the man. And in this scene, he's the one that's sort of speaking sense out of it all. So the sons of Ares, like I said, are being blamed for this. But Leto is just like, I just don't see it. Like, these are really bloody attacks, which they don't normally do. And they're targeting like areas that are full of civilians, which also doesn't feel like them. Fashion outlets, coffee shops, the kinds of things that they would just not do. Pliny says, perhaps Ares has changed his tactics. If Ares is a man, Leto says. Interesting. Augustus swivels abruptly. What makes you think Ares isn't a man? Why do we assume Ares is a man? He could be a woman, could be a group of individuals, for all we know, which would go a long way toward explaining the discordant nature of these new attacks. And Leto asks, Darrow, what do you think? But Pliny steps in. Don't befuddle Darrow with complex questions. Make it a yes or no so he can understand. Behind his leopard smiles, he's an honest, simple beast. You should know that. Oh, God, you guys. This guy. I hate him. And then he talks about how they designed red culture to be patriarchal. And that the simple fact is they would not follow a woman. And Leto is like, Ares might not be a red, though. And they both laugh and are like, okay, sure. Clearly, they do not believe that. They argue a little bit and make some jokes about who else it would be, but they clearly are not giving it a second thought that it's not a red. Pliny says, unlike their propaganda and cyber attacks, the brutality is quite simple to counter. Ares or not, issue a reply. Our kill teams are prepared for tactical strikes on several terrorist training grounds beneath Mars' surface. We should strike now. If we wait, I fear the Sovereign's Praetorians will take matters into their own hands. Loonborn don't understand Mars. They'll slag it up. And Augustus is like, that's dealing with, like, the symptoms. We need to deal with the actual problem. With every bombing, the Sovereign grows wearier of my administration. I intend to poison the son of Ares' roots. I want suicide bombers, not greys. Find the ugliest, nastiest reds on Mars, hold their families hostage, and threaten to kill their sons and daughters if the fathers do not do as we command. Focus the suicide bombers on surface areas with high youth density, as well as 2 choice minds. No women bombers. I want social divide, women against violence. Urban areas too. Not just browns and red miners and agriculturalists. I want dead blue and green children in schools or arcades next to Sons of Ares glyphs. Then we'll see if other colors still sing that girl's gory damn song. Now, this is something that I wish more of us appreciated in terms of the tactics of the powerful. And it's something that unfortunately sounds like such a paranoid, like, what's the word I want? It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's very real. And that is the establishment placing its own people into groups of activists or just marginalized people, causing harm, and then pointing at the cause they are fighting for and saying that these people only want destruction. And this has like been extremely successful historically. And it is very recently with the George Floyd protests and everything, there were not only some like fires and things that broke out that many people said were not done by actual activists, but were done by plants, but also there were videos that people took of people that were like allegedly down, but clearly had markers that signaled they were cops. You could see like one guy had an impression in the back of his jeans of like circles because he clearly had handcuffs in his back pocket. Just like things like this where it's, if you are observant at all, you can tell that they are definitely, but if you try and tell somebody who isn't on the left, those people are not on our side, it's immediately hand waved. Oh yeah, okay. So that's not your fault. So it's always the end. And it's like, yeah, though, yes. Anytime that you are trying to break down the status quo, the establishment will fight you and discredit you. That's like the first, it's basics. It's absolute 101. And so doing this, having them like be suicide bombers, taking out their own people, making sure that it looks like Sons of Ares are responsible for this, absolute child's play, of course. And it doesn't matter that you're hurting people. Who cares? That's not the point. And it doesn't matter that you're like leveling communities. That's also the point. The cruelty is the point. And that's what I think can be so hard for folks to understand is like, we think of things as a sacrifice on behalf of a cause. That's not how the people who are in power think of it. It's not a sacrifice because they don't feel it. It's using, which is what you are for. That's your purpose. And so to them, it's following the rules. It's doing what is expected, not a sacrifice. And how do you fight people for whom it isn't a sacrifice when everything you do is? How can you're not working with the same resources, you know? It's just a really different mindset, which is why you're trying to break it down, because that's not what you want for the world. But that mindset has its advantages in terms of action, and those are hard to overcome. So anyway, there's a moment here where Darrow is like wondering if they ever like researched EO further and found out that her husband's name was also Darrow, that maybe they would start to put things together. But he's like, you know, first of all, they'll find that her husband was killed and that he was certified dead and buried. But also, there are no true records for low red names. I had a number designation and was hanged from my neck until dead. So that's pretty helpful, actually. Like, the dehumanization is working in his favor here, which is, I guess, yay. Oh, sorry. Ashley's in the chat saying Jackal is Adrius. Thank you. I know I will forget that again. So this is when Leto is like, I'm worried this is going to make matters worse. The Suns are a nuisance, but they're not our biggest problem. And if we do this, we could really be setting things off. And he uses the word guilt. He's like, we'd be as guilty as the Suns themselves. And Pliny's like, there's no guilt when you're the judge. It just completely blows it off. But Leto clearly has more of a conscience. And he says, our imperative to rule exists because we are fit to best guide mankind. Their cause is anarchy. We should use that as the weapon. Perhaps fashion a media campaign against the Suns. And he asks Darrow for his opinion, but he doesn't, answer because he knows that they don't value him and the Archgovernor hasn't acknowledged that he was asked, so he's just taking himself out of the equation here. Your plan should be less brutal. That is my point. And Augustus is like, we're going to be killing people to stop terrorists. Don't you think that's a good thing? He kind of does that oversimplification to talk him into a corner. And Leto is smart enough to no, it doesn't really work, but he can't make a good enough argument to stand against this kind of simplistic explanation. The Sons of Ares are not the threat. They are a weapon for our political enemies, the Bellona, to use as an excuse to claim I cannot control Mars. The curly hairs, which I can't, that's so funny, already seek to strip me of the governorship. So it's about consolidating power, which it always is. If I have to kill a few thousand for the greater good, then I will. Which brings us to Darrow. Your purpose here shall be brief. You were a gambit. I thought your merit to be sufficient, but the blood feud has become burdensome. I have decided to sell your contract to another house. Darrow tries to argue with him here. The decision was made a month ago. There is no use bandying words with me. The particulars are simple, Darrow, so they shall be easy to grasp. Pliny hasn't taken his eyes from me. The Archgovernor has been overly kind in giving you the fair warning in case of termination, as stipulated in your contract. And this is so wild. So Darrow's like, you said in my contract I would have 6 months warning. And he's like, you'd have 6 months warning according to your contract unless you did something not befitting House Augustus. And Darrow's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And Pliny says your constant presence on HC talk shows. And he's like, what are you talking about? I've never been on there. I've never even watched it. Oh, please. You relish your own celebrity. Even though they mock you, you bathe in the limelight and cloak the house with shame. And all of this is purely invented. Just straight up nonsense. I can't tell whether or not Augustus believes this, or if it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, how much influence does Pliny have over Augustus' perception of Darrow? Did Pliny create this, like, false narrative convincingly enough to get Augustus over to the other side of getting rid of Darrow? Or is Augustus so determined to get rid of Darrow that he had Pliny construct a fake reason? And if it's Pliny convincing Augustus, is he on the side of the Bolognas? Is he trying? Because that feels like I'm trying to cut you loose so that they can have a stab at you. And that feels like he's trying to do them a favor, which feels suspect to me. You create a tawdry name, you brawl with Bologna in baths set aside for refreshment and contemplation, which is just like, he was set upon in a moment of extreme vulnerability by 9 dudes. And he's the one, you know, like, come on. He has 3 days. Till then, you will accompany us to the surface of Luna and stay in the residence provided for the House Augustus, though as of this moment you are no longer a lancer of this house. You do not represent the Archgovernor, and may not use his name to gain access to facilities, nor curry favor with young ladies or young men, neither in boast, promise, or threat. Your house datapad will be confiscated. Your Lancer ID codes have already been downgraded, and you will cease and desist participation in all projects to which you were previously assigned. I've only been assigned construction projects. Pliny's lips crawl into a reptilian smile. Then this shall be an easy transition. And he's like, all right, so who the fuck are you giving me to? Like, the only reason the Bolognas didn't come after me is because you were protecting me. So what's going to happen? And Pliny is the one that keeps speaking for Augustus in this scene, which feels very significant to me and makes me all the more suspicious of him and his motives in general. So at this point, Darrow is like, Pliny is like saying to Darrow, you're acting like he owes you, but you owe him. You have to show some resolve. And I love this moment because Darrow he's going to have his say, whether they like it or not. Pliny starts to like put his hand on him to get him to leave. And Darrow says, the last time one of the Archgovernor's lackeys touched me, I buried a knife in his cerebellum 6 times. I do not answer to a scarless pixie whelp. I am a peerless Scard, Archprimus of the 542nd class of the Institute of Mars. I answer to the Archgovernor alone. You put Julian on Bologna in the passage with me. I killed him there for you. I warred against Carnus for you. I kept my mouth, the mouths of my men, sealed after you tried to buy your son a victory at the Institute. Leto flinches at that. I altered the recordings. I proved myself better than your blood heirs. Now, my liege, you say I'm a liability. And finally, the Archgovernor speaks. You are of little substance. Your family is dead. They left you with no lands, no holdings, no position. It was all seized. What scraps you've been given by your betters, cherish. What favor you curried, remember. I thought you favored deeds, not titles. Mustang has left you. Do not make the mistake of severing me from you as well. Finally, he raises his head to look at me. My enemies embarrassed you, so they embarrassed me, Darrow. You told me you would win, but then you lost. And that changes everything. And that is the end of the chapter, and I was so angry. I was so mad. I don't know what to think of Pliny. I feel like he's working for Bologna. I feel like he's fucking, but that might just be because he's clearly untrustworthy, and so I am assuming it's a matter of betrayal when it's simply self-interest. I don't know what self-interest he has in Darrow being gone, except maybe that Darrow was so favored and he's hoping to somehow, but he can't do for Augustus what Darrow was doing, so he can't take his place. That doesn't even make sense. And now I'm thinking it's Pliny because he's so obviously antagonistic, but what if it's Leto? And he felt threatened by Darrow. He seems like a nice guy, and Darrow likes him, but that doesn't mean anything. Maybe Leto is the one behind it because he just wants him out of the way. I liked him in that scene as well because he seemed to be arguing for less violence. But that may just be the way he manages Augustus, the way he manages the people around him by seeming like he's the voice of reason. So yeah, I'm really curious because in this scene, as much as Darrow asks where he's being sent, they don't answer the question. And I don't know at all, can he climb back from this? What other opportunities does he have to distinguish himself at this point? Is there going to be another game like this in his future? It seems like that's sort of fallen by the wayside. That game was the final part of the test before getting assigned to your actual career, So just really wondering what Darrow's going to do. I feel like he has to learn how to wheel and deal. Where will he be put that he can learn how to do that? Very, very curious. But I'm going to have to wrap this up. So next time I'm going to be reading chapters 5 through 8, which is only 29 pages. And I'm really you guys, it's going to be so hard to stop. Chapters 5 through 8. All right. Thank you all again so much for listening. Thank you, Ashley, for commissioning this. And I hope you're enjoying the coverage. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.